It was just another morning at Torres and Associates. Executives in crisp suits hurried across the parking lot, briefcases in hand, while the company's founder, Richard Torres, made his way toward his black Mercedes. Everything seemed ordinary, until a boy's voice cut through the cold air. "Don't get in the car." The sound was sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. Everyone froze. A 12-year-old sprinted across the lot, his sneakers skidding on the wet ground. His name was Kevin. Few of the executives even knew who he was. To them, he was just the cleaning lady's kid, the boy who sometimes tagged along while his mother worked overnight shifts, invisible in the hallways. But today, Kevin refused to stay invisible. He threw himself in front of the car, breathing hard, his hands shaking with urgency. "Please, sir, don't get in. Something's wrong." Security moved in immediately, trying to pull him back. The vice president of sales scoffed, already muttering about calling the police. But Richard Torres hesitated. For reasons he couldn't explain, he looked into the boy's eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in years: pure, unfiltered truth. Kevin's words tumbled out, raw and desperate. "I saw them last night. They were messing with your car." For a moment, silence swallowed the entire parking lot. Executives glanced at each other nervously. The CEO's hand, which had been reaching for the golden door handle, dropped to his side. Kevin's heart raced. He knew speaking up could get his mother in trouble, maybe even cost her job. But he couldn't stay quiet. Not when he'd seen men tampering with the car. Not when he knew a life was at stake. The boy who had always been overlooked, cleaning floors with his mother, waiting for her in dark offices, was suddenly the only person brave enough to speak the truth. And in that fragile, dangerous pause, Richard Torres realized something. Sometimes the people we notice the least are the ones who see the most. What happened next would change everything. For the company, for the CEO, and for the boy who refused to stay silent. The executives shifted uneasily as Richard Torres lowered his hand, silencing the vice president. His sharp eyes fixed on Kevin. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. Kevin swallowed hard. His voice trembled, but his words carried weight. "Last night, while my mom was cleaning upstairs, I was in the lobby finishing my homework. 2 men came down to the garage. They weren't supposed to be there. They went straight to your car and stayed under it for at least 20 minutes. The crowd murmured. Torres frowned. "Plenty of people here wear suits, Kevin. Could have been anyone." Kevin shook his head. His small hands flew up, describing shapes in the air. "No, sir. I'll never forget them. One had a scar, right here, across his forehead. The other was tall, bald, and he had a snake tattoo climbing up his neck." The words fell like ice on the morning air. Torres froze. He knew those names, Scar Valdez and Anthony Snake. They weren't employees. They were enforcers, men who worked for the kind of people Torres spent his career trying to keep out of his clean, respectable world. The vice president forced a laugh, though his face had gone pale. "Richard, this is madness. We're delaying meetings because of a child's fantasy?" But Kevin didn't flinch. He turned to face the man with surprising fire in his eyes. "Sir, I know you don't see me. I know I'm just the cleaner's kid. But I hear things at night that you don't. I notice when something's wrong." Before anyone could speak, the side door burst open. Carmen Rodriguez, Kevin's mother, came rushing out, still in her faded blue cleaning uniform. Her face was flushed with panic. "Kevin, what are you doing?" She grabbed his arm, her voice trembling. "Mr. Torres, I'm so sorry. He's just a child." But Kevin gently pulled away. His voice cracked, but his resolve never wavered. "Mom, I can't let him get in that car." For a long moment, silence reigned. Executives shuffled uncomfortably, embarrassed by the scene. To them, Carmen was invisible, a woman who had scrubbed their offices for 15 years without acknowledgement. But now, standing beside her son, she looked smaller, ashamed, caught between fear for her job and pride in her boy's courage. Torres's tone softened. "Carmen, your son isn't causing trouble. He's trying to save my life. You should be proud." The words stunned her. She lowered her gaze, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Torres turned back to Kevin. Those men. Did you hear them say anything? Kevin squeezed his eyes shut, searching his memory. The one with the scar said, "Problem solved by Thursday." The other laughed and said, "Now he knows not to cross the right people." Torres felt his chest tighten. Today was Thursday. And just last week, he had refused a shady offer to sell land. The threat he dismissed as empty suddenly roared back with terrifying clarity. He looked around, the car, the child, the suits impatiently checking their watches. For the first time in years, Richard Torres felt a surge of gratitude. Gratitude toward a boy who had nothing to gain and everything to lose by speaking up. In that cold parking lot, surrounded by men in expensive ties and polished shoes, the only one who truly saved him was a 12-year-old kid who refused to be ignored. Torres straightened, his decision made. His voice carried authority. "Graves, lock this place down. I want security here immediately. And no one touches that car until it's inspected." The executives fell silent. Everything had changed. The parking lot had gone still. Torres's command had already sent security rushing to the car with specialized equipment. The minutes dragged like hours. Executives whispered nervously, their confidence unraveling. Finally, the head of security returned, his face drained of color. "Sir, we found an explosive device. Sophisticated, wired to the ignition. It was set to detonate at 9:15. Gasps cut through the crowd. Suits shifted uneasily, realizing they had nearly watched their CEO climb into a death trap. Mitchell, the loudest skeptic only moments earlier, looked as if the ground had dropped beneath his feet. Torres didn't even glance at him. Instead, he knelt in front of Kevin, placing both hands firmly on the boy's shoulders. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, softened to something rarely heard. "You saved my life, Kevin. That's not something I can repay with words. Tell me, what do you want?" Kevin's reply came without hesitation. "Find the people who did this, sir. Because if they tried once, they'll try again." Carmen's breath caught in her chest. Pride and fear collided inside her. Her son had just stared down killers, yet she knew speaking up had painted a target on their backs. Torres rose, his mind already racing. He looked at Carmen and spoke with a surprising gentleness. "Your family isn't the problem here. You're the reason I'm standing. From this moment forward, you're under my protection." He gestured toward the building. "Come with me. We need to talk." In the elevator, Kevin clutched his mother's hand, but his mind was still racing. "Last night, when Mom was cleaning the conference room, I saw papers on your desk. Something called Riverside. Renewal." Torres's jaw tightened. Riverside, the luxury development he had been pressured to sign. A project that would demolish entire neighborhoods of working families. He had resisted, but the investors pushing it were powerful. Ruthless. Kevin's voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed his fear. "The men said after Thursday, you'd finally sign. They were counting on you being gone." Carmen stiffened. Her sister lived in the very community that Riverside would erase. Suddenly, the stakes weren't just about her son's courage or Torres's survival. They were about families like her own. Torres's chest tightened as the truth clicked into place. His death wouldn't just silence his refusal. It would hand control of the company to others who would sign the deal without question. The timing. The sophistication. It was a plan crafted from inside. He turned to Kevin. "You said they had special keys. That means someone here helped them. Did you see anyone else?" Kevin nodded slowly, his voice dropping. "Yes." About half an hour later, one of the directors came down. He didn't meet them, but when they crossed paths, they nodded. Like they knew each other. Torres braced himself for the name. "Which director?" Kevin's eyes flicked nervously toward the floor. Then he whispered, "Mr. Mitchell." Carmen shuddered, her grip on Kevin's hand tightening. The boy had just exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the company. They weren't dealing with strangers anymore. This was betrayal from within. Torres stepped out of the elevator into his private office, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Carmen. Kevin. I hope you're ready. Because we're not just uncovering who planted that bomb, we're going after everyone behind it." He looked out over the city skyline, his reflection standing beside theirs in the glass. And when we're finished, they'll regret the day they underestimated a cleaning lady's son. For the first time in years, Carmen allowed herself to smile inside that tower of glass and steel. Her son hadn't just saved a life. He had forced powerful men to finally see those who had always been ignored. By the window that overlooked the city, an unlikely alliance had formed, a billionaire CEO, a cleaning lady, and her 12-year-old son. It was the last combination Mitchell and his co-conspirators ever expected. But Kevin was already thinking 3 steps ahead. All those nights waiting for his mother had taught him things no executive would ever notice. Every camera angle. Every guard rotation. Every locked door that wasn't really locked. For years he had been invisible, but invisibility had its advantages. It made him the perfect observer. "Mr. Torres," Kevin said with a steady voice, "there's a server room on the 30th floor. No cameras. No guards. That's where every email and call is archived. If Mitchell's dirty, the proof is there." Carmen clutched his hand. "Kevin, this is dangerous. If they catch you—" Her son cut her off gently. "Mom, you always told me doing the right thing comes with risk. You cleaned these halls every night so others could succeed. Now it's our turn to protect the man who listened when no one else would." Torres stared at him, struck by the courage in those young eyes. "Show me, Kevin. Prove you know this building better than anyone." For the next 2 hours, the boy became their guide through hidden corridors and stairwells even the CEO had never seen. He slipped past cameras with ease, pointing out blind spots. He knew which doors jammed, which alarms had faulty sensors. "When you're invisible long enough," Kevin whispered, disabling a motion detector with practiced ease, "you start seeing everything the important people miss." Inside the dim server room, he moved with quiet confidence. His cousin had taught him coding, and Kevin put those lessons to use. In less than an hour, they uncovered mountains of evidence. Encrypted emails, wire transfers, even recordings of phone calls plotting Torres's murder. The final file made Torres's hands tremble with anger. It was a blueprint, detailing exactly how Mitchell would seize power after Torres's accidental death. Step 1. Approve Riverside, the project that would bulldoze entire neighborhoods. Step 2. Secure investor backing. Step 3. Erase opposition. Kevin's voice broke the silence. "Tomorrow's Friday. 2 o'clock is the quarterly investor meeting, right? Mitchell always saves his big announcements for that stage." Torres raised an eyebrow. "And what are you suggesting, Kevin?" The boy lifted his chin. "That we don't just stop him, we destroy his reputation in front of every investor, every reporter, and every partner he's been trying to impress. If he wanted an audience, we'll give him one." For the first time since the bomb was discovered, Richard Torres smiled. Friday came fast. By mid-afternoon, the grand conference room was filled with 50 investors and members of the press. Mitchell stood at the head of the table, immaculate in his suit, his voice smooth and confident. He spun the story with practiced ease. The sabotage attempt had been handled, the company was stronger than ever, and now was the perfect time to move forward with Riverside. The investors applauded politely. Mitchell beamed. "And with Richard preparing to step back from certain responsibilities, I'm proud to announce—" At that exact moment, the screen behind him flickered. His polished slides vanished. In their place appeared a folder marked, "Evidence." From the back of the room, Torres stood with Carmen at his side. Kevin, holding a small tablet, gave the faintest of smiles. The trap was sprung. The boardroom was frozen in stunned silence. For the first time in years, Richard Torres wasn't just a CEO. He was a man who had stared death in the face and realized what true loyalty looked like. "James," Torres said, his voice calm but sharp as glass, "you didn't just betray me. You betrayed this company, these investors, and every single employee who trusted you." Mitchell's face twisted with rage and fear, but before he could answer, the federal agent stepped forward. The sound of handcuffs locking echoed through the room like a gavel. Kevin stood close to his mother, clutching the tablet that had exposed everything. His sneakers looked out of place against the polished marble floors, but in that moment, he was taller than anyone else in the room. Torres placed a steady hand on Kevin's shoulder. "This boy saw what none of us did. While we were too busy chasing profits and power, Kevin was paying attention. He saved my life, and reminded me that no one is invisible. A ripple of applause spread across the boardroom. For once, the investors weren't clapping for money, they were clapping for truth. Carmen Rodriguez covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had cleaned these offices for 15 years without being noticed, and now, in front of millionaires and cameras, her son was being honored as the company's hero. Mitchell, dragged toward the door, muttered in disbelief, "A janitor's kid, ruined me." Kevin raised his chin. His voice was steady, almost too steady for a 12-year-old. "You ruined yourself. I just made sure the world saw it." The words hit the room like thunder. From that day forward, Torres and Associates was never the same. The Riverside project was cancelled, families in the community kept their homes, and a company that had almost sold its soul rediscovered something deeper, dignity. But this wasn't the end. 6 months later, Kevin, now 13, was a living legend in the corporate world. Business magazines wrote about the boy who saved a CEO. Employees who once walked past him without a glance now stopped to shake his hand. Torres gave him the title of Special Security Advisor, but Kevin's real influence was something no title could capture. Torres often stood by the window of his office, watching Kevin walk through the halls with quiet confidence. He knew this boy wasn't just his savior. Kevin was his compass, a reminder that leadership meant more than power. It meant listening to voices no one else heard. And in the story of Torres and Associates, the name Kevin Rodriguez was no longer invisible. It was unforgettable. Kevin stood at the front of the conference room, small in stature but commanding the full attention of a dozen visiting executives. The teenager's navy blue suit, simple, crisp, and perfectly tailored, made him look older than his 13 years. Torres had insisted on buying it, saying, "If you're going to change the world, you should at least look the part." Kevin clicked to the next slide. His voice carried with calm conviction, "Most companies completely ignore the people who know their buildings best. The janitors, night security guards, maintenance crews. They see everything. They hear everything. But no one ever asks them what they've observed. That is a mistake." Murmurs spread across the room. The executives weren't used to being lectured by a teenager, but Kevin had already earned their respect. At the back of the room, Carmen Rodriguez watched, no longer wearing her faded janitor's uniform. She was now Director of Internal Operations, a position created for her after the scandal. Her hands rested proudly in her lap as she listened to her son transform years of social invisibility into a groundbreaking business model. Torres rose from his chair. Kevin developed what we now call the Total Visibility Protocol. In just 6 months, this system helped us predict 4 industrial sabotage attempts, uncover 2 internal fraud schemes, and save over $5 million in operational losses. All because we listened to the people everyone else ignored. A hand shot up from one of the visiting executives. "Mr. Torres, forgive me, but how did you even discover that a 12-year-old boy had this analytical ability?" Torres smiled faintly. His mind flashed back to that cold morning in the parking lot, Kevin's trembling voice cutting through the air. "Don't get in the car. Because I almost died for not listening to someone I thought was irrelevant." Kevin taught me that intelligence has no age, no color, no social status. Value is everywhere, if you pay attention. The room fell silent. Meanwhile, 200 miles away in a federal penitentiary, James Mitchell was living a different reality. Once the powerful vice president of sales, now inmate number 44192, he was serving a 25-year sentence for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. His mansion was gone, his accounts seized, his family estranged. Mitchell spent long hours in the prison library, obsessively devouring every article about Torres and Associates. But what tortured him most were the headlines about Kevin Rodriguez, the boy who had become a corporate prodigy, lecturing at universities and reshaping global business culture. "How did a janitor's kid destroy me?" he muttered to anyone who would listen. "You destroyed yourself," his cellmate finally told him. "The kid just held up a mirror." But Mitchell never understood. Even in prison, arrogance blinded him. Back at Torres and Associates, Kevin concluded his presentation with words that had become his personal motto: "Invisibility can be a curse or a superpower. It depends on who's paying attention." The executives applauded warmly, some even rising to their feet. Torres stood beside Kevin, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. This young man has not only revolutionized our security but has redefined our understanding of leadership. He proved that true leaders aren't the ones who shout the loudest, but the ones who listen, observe, and value every person around them. Later that afternoon, Torres and Kevin walked outside to the new Riverside Community Center. Where Mitchell had once planned luxury condos, there was now a park filled with children. Families enjoyed food stands, music rooms, and job training programs, all funded by the millions Torres redirected from the canceled project. Kevin watched his 8-year-old cousin learning violin in one of the center's free music rooms. His eyes softened. "Mr. Torres, that morning in the parking lot, I was terrified. I thought no one would hear me." Carmen wrapped her arms around her son. Tears glistened in her eyes. "And yet, here we are, because you had the courage to speak." Torres looked at them, deeply moved. He saw not just a mother and son, but the embodiment of everything his company had almost lost. "Kevin," Torres asked softly, "have you decided what you want to study in college?" The boy paused. He gazed around the community center, children laughing, parents smiling, hope reborn where despair once lived. Then he looked back at Torres, a spark of certainty in his young eyes. "Yes," he said quietly. "I want to study leadership. Because people like Mitchell taught me what it isn't, and people like my mom taught me what it is." Torres nodded slowly. And in that moment, he realized the boy who had once been invisible was destined to shape not just a company's future, but the future of leadership itself. 6 months after that morning in the parking lot, life looked very different. Families who once feared eviction still lived in their homes. The company that nearly lost its soul had found a new direction. And a boy who was once invisible had become impossible to ignore. Kevin wasn't dreaming small. He wanted to launch a program that found hidden talent in communities society overlooks. Kids who clean floors, guard doors, or fix pipes but carry sharp minds and unspoken potential. Torres didn't even hesitate. "We'll be your first partner," he promised. That night, in their new apartment, a place Torres insisted was an investment in Kevin's future, not charity, Carmen tucked her son into bed. Kevin whispered, "Mom, do you regret all those years of working in silence, when no one even saw you?" Carmen paused, her mind drifting through years of unnoticed nights pushing a mop through echoing hallways. Then she smiled. "No, my love. Every invisible night prepared us for the day we could no longer be ignored." 3 lives had been rewritten. Torres discovered that leadership isn't about power, but about listening. Carmen realized that invisibility had been her training ground for strength. And Kevin proved that age, race, or social class could never define a person's worth. Mitchell tried to build his empire by stepping on others. In the end, he destroyed only himself. Torres, Kevin, and Carmen built something stronger, a company, a community, and a chosen family bound by respect and dignity. The real victory wasn't Mitchell's downfall. It was the birth of a world where children like Kevin are heard early, where mothers like Carmen are recognized for their wisdom, and where leaders like Torres understand that the greatest return on investment comes from human dignity. Today, when kids from underprivileged neighborhoods walk through the doors of Torres and Associates, they see what Mitchell never understood. Real power doesn't come from tearing others down. It comes from lifting up the very people society tries hardest to ignore. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that a single voice can change everything, then don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs hope, and remember, sometimes the heroes we're searching for are right in front of us, if we're willing to stop and listen.